Sax, you've actually been dancing along this line. Last night I was using your new Slack killer or coexister. I'm not sure. It feels like a Slack killer to me because I'm moving my company to it over the weekend. We're moving to Glue. And
Nice.
You and I were doing some I may need to wet my beak on this one.
We want you to wet your beak.
It feels like 100 bagger to me. I'm in. I need
It
to
is a
slide
Slack
over.
killer. That's the way we're thinking about it.
Killer-esque because
J. Cal, can you do that again in Christopher Walken voice, please?
I need to wet my beak. Feels like 100x. Sliding 500. Wow. Sax, tell me about product decisions. Where does the AI end and your product begin?
Yeah, well, it's a good point. I mean, I think where the AI ends, we want to use the most powerful AI models possible, and we want to focus on enterprise chat. So you could think of us as, for sure, a Slack killer or Slack competitor. It's just that Slack wasn't built for the AI era. Glue is AI native. What does that mean? No channels. I showed this to Chamath. The first thing he said is, you had me at no channels, right? People are so sick of channels. You have to keep up with all these hundreds and hundreds of channels. And the real problem with channels is there's one thread in a channel that you want to see. In order to see it, you have to join the whole channel, and now you're getting all this noise. People just want the threads. So if you look at what's the chat model inside of ChatGPT, it's just threads, right? You create a topic-based thread in ChatGPT. The AI comes up with a name for it, puts it in the sidebar, and then if you want to talk about something else, you create a new chat. That's exactly the way that Glue works. It's just multiplayer. You just put the groups and individuals you want on the thread. Let me just show you real quick. Here's my Glue here. And you can see that in the sidebar, I've got all the threads that I've been involved in. And like I said, you can address them to multiple people or groups. And then you've got the chat here. Now, we've also fully integrated AI. And so Nick, who's our producer, just in this thread, said, at Glue AI, what countries does Sax talk about most in episodes? Episodes is a group we created to be the repository of all of the transcripts of our episodes. And so Glue did a search and it said David Sachs frequently discusses Ukraine the most. Yeah.
Really?
So then Nick said, be more specific about Sachs' stance on Ukraine-Russia war.
Oh boy.
And
It's gonna overload the server.
Well, here it said here, David Sachs has articulated a nuanced and critical perspective on the Ukraine-Russia war across various episodes of the All In Pod. Here are some key points encapsulating his stance. And it nailed it. It's talked about prevention through diplomacy, opposition to NATO expansion, humanitarian concerns, skepticism of military intervention, peace deal proposal. I'll copy and paste this onto Twitter X later today. But the point is, it nailed it across all these different episodes. And then this is a feature of Glue. It provided sources. So it cites where it got all the information from. So imagine, we're doing this for the All In Pod, but you could imagine that instead of it being transcripts of a podcast, it could be your work documents. You now have in your main chat the ability just to ask, hey, at Glue AI, remind me where we left that project, or tell me who the expert is on this subject matter, or who's contributed the most to this project. I've actually figured out using Glue AI who's contributed the most deal flow at Craft. It's pretty amazing. Now, let me show you some of the
what's the answer? What's the answer?
I'm not going to say here.
I think it's Brian.
Okay,
Brian's my guy.
Those two
Brian or
Brian's
Jeff?
my guy. I want to hire Brian.
No. If I got to get Sachs, I go Daniel and Brian. Boom,
No, I
boom,
wanna
boom.
go-
That's
yeah.
how I get Sachs on the line.
Okay, you
right,
take
now-
Daniel. I'll hire Brian.
I would.
Okay,
Then
now-
we'll
That's a good-
reconstitute Craft. We'll call
Absolutely.
it Graft.
All right, look, let me show you a couple.
Hold
let
on
me
a
show you,
second. Sachs,
what?
I just looked at the ChatGPT-4 Omni server, and when you did that query, it actually rolled its eyes. Keep going.
Okay.
Hey,
So we talked about how ChatGPT 4.0 understands sentiment in conversations, and I think this is a really good example. So Evan, who's my co-founder at Glue, was just testing this for us, and he asked, what is each bestie's personality type based on conversations in episodes? And first of all, it figured out who the besties are. We didn't program that. It just figured it out on its own, which is pretty impressive. And here's what it said about each bestie's personality. So it says, Jason Calacanis, role, the moderator and entertainer, personality traits, charismatic, humorous, lively, and the glue of the group.
Say
often
more.
praised for his ability to make the podcast entertaining and keep the conversation flowing. Jason's energy and ability to bring humor into discussions are key elements that define his role in the podcast. Comments he is acknowledged for his role in bringing the group together. Chamath Palihapitiya, the visionary and hustler, personality traits, insightful, driven, persistent. Chamath's relentless drive and ability to hustle are admired by his peers, making him a core part of the podcast's intellectual discussions. I'll skip me, but does Freeberg, the pragmatic scientist and realist, pragmatic, methodical, and a bit reserved.
Oh.
Freeberg's often the voice of reason, bringing a scientific and realistic perspective to the discussion. He focuses on analysis and logical reasoning. And then it cites where it got this from. And it says here, overall, the dynamic between the four besties creates a well-rounded and engaging podcast with each member bringing their unique strengths and personality traits to the table. I think that's pretty incredible.
How woke is this? Have you put any rails on it, or is this just pure ChatGPT 4.0 combined with the data? Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're doing here is we're wrapping ChatGPT 4.0 with glue features that we've implemented to get the most out of the conversation. There's things we have to do to scope the prompt. And then we're using a retrieval augmented generation service called Raggy, which does RAG as a service that basically slurps in our transcripts and makes them accessible to the AI. So that's basically the stack that we're using. But as the models get better and better, Glue just gets better and better. Again,
can I just make a comment on this? It's just so clean. JCal was the key for me in abandoning Slack. He told me 2 or 3 years ago, he called me and he said, you can tell me the exact channels. I eliminated some channels at work.
Random.
There was like 2 or 3 channels that you banned that your Slack instance wasn't allowed to have. And I was like, this is genius. And I went in and I was like, all of our companies should just eliminate these channels. And we could only get like 20% or 30% compliance. But it really started to turn me off Slack because I would get caught in these threads that were just so totally useless. And I thought, why aren't people working? And this is really great because you cannot blather on about nonsense in Glue, which I find really useful.
Well, this is what happens when Slack...
we use it at 80-90, just so you know. So we got into the early
When you get into Slack
beta.
too much, people start to think Slack is the job. And replying to Slacks and having conversations is the job when there's actually a job to be done.
There's a job to be done.
Yeah. And so it's important. And what I liked about this implementation stacks was it's like the ability to make a feed or a data source inside of your communication platform. So the fact that you imported all of the episodes and the transcripts is great. But what I want is like our HubSpot or our sales CRM. I want our Zendesk. I want our LinkedIn jobs and our LinkedIn job applications. I want our Notion. I want our Coda to each have the ability. And when I was using it last night, what you do is you use the @ symbol to evoke and to summon in a way. It's like summoning Beetlejuice. So you summon your AI, but then you tell it what data set you want to go after. So you say, at AI, let's talk about, I don't know, how do you manage your deal flow at Craft? Do you use software like CRM software to manage deals?
Brian,
we just do it all in Glue, but we do it all in Glue, so it's already right there. But you're right. So the first thing that Glue AI has access to is all of your chat history, which is amazing because you get then we can look at all your attachments, and we've got, I think, 6 integrations at launch, and there'll be more. So yeah, like all of your enterprise data will be there. In the short term, you're right. You have to summon the repository by app mentioning because the AI needs a little bit of help of where to look. Mm-hmm. But in the future, it's going to figure it out on its own. So it's just going to become more and more seamless. But
it'll insert itself. So we have a discussion about sales, and then you might have a sales bot that says, hey, by the way, nobody's called this client in 3 months.
Well, that's where I want to go with it is I call that promptless, which is I want the AI just to chime in when it determines that it has relevant information and can help the team, even if it hasn't been summoned yet. But we need some model improvement for that, frankly. I mean, we'll be able to get there by GPT-5, but that's totally where this is headed. I'll show you just one more fun example, if I could. Let me just show you this. So I asked it to write a letter to Lena Khan to be a guest at the All In Summit. And I told it, mention positive things we've said about Lena Khan in episodes of the All In Pod. And so it wrote this letter. Dear Chair Khan, we hope this message finds you well. On behalf of the host of the All In Pod, we're excited to send an invitation for you to speak at the upcoming All In Summit. And then it says, in our conversations, we have frequently highlighted your impressive credentials and the impactful work you've undertaken. For example, in episode 36, we acknowledge your trailblazing role. So the letter was able to quote episodes of the All In Pod just without anyone having to go do that research and figure out like what would be the best. Because I told it, only say positive things. Don't say anything negative. Right. And then it said warm regards and it said who the 4 besties were. Again, we never told it who the besties are. We just said, write us a letter.
Yeah.
So it's pretty incredible. Now, this is just an example with the all-in pod, but think about any work context where the AI has access to your previous work documents. It's pretty amazing what it can do.
Well, I mean, it is kind of in the name. Like, this is glue, put you together, and Slack is where you slack off. It makes total sense. The brands give you a little bit of a tip. We should have seen it coming with Slack.
Totally.